Now that we have the robot basically built, we need to do one of the fun parts, which is color and making him really come to life. So what we first need to do is, now that we have him all built, kind of want to shrink him down a little bit because he's pretty large for a web file and we don't want him to be that big. So I'm going to use my selection tool to select the entire thing. Hold shift. Always remember to hold shift, because if you don't, you can really mess up his proportions, um, and we don't want him to look like that. So always hold shift, click, and drag. And we're just going to make him a bit smaller and move to the middle. Maybe that's a little too small. Okay, another thing that we want to do is kind of create a darker stroke or outline around our shapes. And so to do that, you're going to get your selection tool and drag it around the whole thing. Except for this next part, we have to deselect the blend. And we're going to deselect the blend by holding shift and clicking the blend one time. If you move your mouse away, you should see that the blend is now deselected. It's the only thing that shows up in black. Everything else is outlined in blue, which is exactly what we want. And this stroke option for weight shows up here. If you hover your mouse over it, you keep your mouse on it, it's still highlighted blue. So what you just have to remember to move your mouse away once you click shift, and then it will deselect. We're going to increase the stroke weight here at 2 points. We're going to make him a little bigger so that we can see that definition in his eyes. That's pretty good. Okay, so I want to direct your attention over here to your swatches panel. In your swatches panel at the bottom left, you see what looks like a stack of books. That is your swatch libraries menu. There are tons of pre-made color palettes in here for anything that you may need, which is really, really nice, especially when it comes to things like earth tones and definitely skin tones. When you're creating characters, you have lots of skin tones. You even have ones for food, like ice cream, which is pretty cool. So it's nice to have all these pre-made color palettes in here, so don't forget to use this libraries to your benefit. You also have a library of gradients, which is amazing. You have all of these pre-built gradients that do the work for you. And for this one, we're going to go to gradients, and we're going to choose metals because, well, he's a robot. The select his face, and the metal that I chose to use is this lead. I like the gentle gradient that it has, that gentle shadow right here. We're going to create some shine with some of the other handmade gradients. So this will really offset that a little bit. So I wanted to show you kind of what this completed robot is going to look like so you can get an idea of how to color him. So here's a finished robot that we made last year. And so we're going to color all of these areas with that same gradient. And instead of having to go and click the gradient again, it's really, really easy to get that gradient where you want it. So if you have that gradient in his face and you already have the face selected, you'll see that your gradient shows up here in your fill at the bottom of your toolbar. To fill in the other areas, all you have to do is click, hold, and drag your mouse into those areas. Now notice how it's telling me that I can't fill these legs right here. And that's because these legs don't have a fill already. And so what we have to do is we have to go fill the legs with a color first. So you're going to select the legs, and you can do both at the same time by holding shift. and fill it. Do you see how it has this red line through it? That means that there is no fill. So essentially when we're clicking on this, we're clicking through it to our artboard. And so sometimes you have to pay attention to if it has a fill, because if you click and try to drag this, you can't, because you're clicking on the artboard, so you'd have to click on the line itself. So filling that with just white will fix that problem. So we're going to go back to select that gradient, click and drag. His ears were the same. This little part on the top and the antenna. Actually, I think I made the antenna a light gray, so you can just select that and choose one of the lighter grays in your swatches. That one looks pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to create the yellow to orange, or like the gold to orange gradient. And you can do this by just using your swatches. So I'm going to select his eye because we know that's that color. I'm going to change that to a gradient, so click that gradient to activate it. But now I'm going to put my own colors down. So I'm going to use this kind of goldish yellow and an orange. And then I'm going to get rid of the black and white and move this brighter orange over, because I just want a tiny bit of that bright orange reflected. Not very much at all, just a little. So basically like this. Okay, and then you can grab that and put it over here. And let me see. No, it's a little bit more yellow. Let's see. Let's see what the brighter yellow looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I have the brighter yellow, this kind of goldish orange, and then the brighter orange. And it creates this, which I think looks a lot better. So we're going to use this one. So I'm going to click and drag. And what else is yellow? Oh, this green and the bottom button. So click and drag. Come on. And the bottom button. Perfect. Okay, now we're going to create the white and blue. So if you see this one, it has a bit of white on both sides, and that creates that really cool reflection like you would see in a screen. And we want to bring in bits of white and some dark grays or blacks to really create a shine and shadow. And so this is actually, if you look at this gradient, it's the white to blue to white again. So we're going to go white, let's get rid of that, to blue. I don't know if I use this color. Let's see, probably good. And then white again at the end. We really want to expand this blue so that we have the majority blue. And it really isn't blue enough, so you can feather it out. Or if you feel like you need more blue, you can go add like a little shade darker and feather that out. And that looks pretty good. All right. See, it kind of has that shine like it would normally be a screen, which is what we want. Okay, so we have the blue buttons here, the shoulder joints, and the neck that are all blue. So let's go fill those in. Remember that you just click and drag to fill it in. And all of those buttons. 3, 4. It's looking pretty good. Now we're going to create that red metal look. This one is a little bit different because it has a couple more shades in there. It has a red, then a white, then a red, then a black. And that's what creates the shine, is that little strip of white, and then the shadow on the right, which is the black. So we are going to go get rid of these. And we're going to do the red and the black. Bump this white over. And then we need another red here. So you can just go drag down another red. And that's going to give us that shine because we just want a little strip of white on the left side. There we go. And his hands, top button, oops, and his antenna. Then what we did is, I'm going to zoom in to get these smaller areas, and you could actually, because my other robot has a little bit different features, but if you wanted to actually make his eyes a little bigger, you can, but that's up to you guys. You don't have to do that. I just realized when I looked at my other one, I made a little bit different proportions. And once you do the keyboard shortcuts, it's really easy to fix. Oops. Just going to bump him over. Okay. So what I did behind the eyes was just did a little shade darker than, I think I like this one better, than what was in on the face. And you want to put that on the back of some of the screens, and then you want the outside of his mouth to be just one shade darker than that. Don't forget these buttons. You can do them both at the same time. And there you go. Now, there's a couple last things we want to do. We want to do a shadow at the bottom, and we want to do just some tiny reflections in his eye. And to do the reflections in the eye, you just are going to create a white circle. Remember to hold your shift key to create that circle. Make sure there's no stroke on it and just the white fill, because we don't want it looking like a hole in his eye. We just want a tiny, tiny reflection, and then you can alt copy that over. For the shadow, it's really pretty easy. There's multiple ways that you can make a shadow in Illustrator, but because we've learned about gradients so far, I just kind of want to show you how to use a gradient tool. Like I said, there are many ways to do a shadow, but this one is pretty easy. So you're going to get your ellipse tool, and you're going to create kind of a very oblong ellipse. And we're going to give that that black and white gradient. It's just a clear place to start. Our shadow is, of course, going to be radial. We want it to radiate out, much like a shadow would in real life. But right here we have the white inside and the dark outside, and that's the opposite of what we want. But Illustrator has this really cool button right here that says reverse gradient. If you click reverse gradient, it's going to put it the way that we want it. And of course the black is a little too harsh of a color, so we're going to grab one of those light grays and replace that instead. Okay. So the next thing that we have to do is we're going to look at this aspect ratio. And what it does is, if you can kind of imagine it, right now our shadow is basically standing upright, much like our robot is on our artboard. But we want to flatten that shadow out so that it looks like it's actually underneath him. And so that's where your aspect ratio comes in. If you change your aspect ratio to about 30%, you will see that flatten out and look way more like a shadow. If you did not remove the stroke on your shadow and you have something that looks like this, that's not good. That doesn't look like a shadow. That looks like he's falling through a hole, right? So you have to make sure that you have no stroke on your shadow. And if you needed to, you could kind of squish it down even more, basic whatever you want it to look like. And I'm going to bring this in to feather out that white a bit more. And you always want to, when you're finished with it, arrange, send to back, and then it can go right underneath your robot and make what looks like a really cool shadow. All right, guys, that's it for the robot. You made it through. You can make sure to save an AI version of this in case you ever wanted to come back to it. But when you're done and you're ready to submit it, you can go to File, Export. You're going to export as, and you're going to make sure that you're in your network folder and choose PNG, PNG, PNG.